cell membrane, look around the room or look at these things. What do these things have in common?
They're solid.
Okay. In terms of what they do, what each one is supposed to do, what's common? What's similar about them? Yes?
Keep some things out, but keep some things in.
Yeah, it like filters, right? So I think the main word here is like filtering, or like you said, some things are able to pass through, other things are not. So it's controlled what can enter and what cannot enter. Okay? Alright, now here are three functions of a cell membrane. Well, it's a barrier. It's what separates the inside of the cell from outside world. So it's a barrier. It also regulates what enters or leaves the cell. And thirdly, it helps maintain homeostasis. Now, the word homeostasis means maintaining a stable condition or balance. All right. So that's a key to how cells survive. They maintain this balance, internal balance. They maintain homeostasis. All right. Now we want to pay attention to the structure. What is it mainly made of? Mainly, what is the basis of the cell membrane? The membrane is made of. It's made of phospholipids. All right. Okay. Tell me what phospholipids are. Yes.
Head and tail.
It's got head and two tails. Okay, the tail end is what? Hydrophobic. It fears water. The head end is hydrophilic, likes water. So the way they arrange into two layers is a key to how it forms that cell membrane. Okay, so that chemical nature of having hydrophilic end and hydrophobic end helps it to arrange into these two layers where the head ends are facing the water and the tail ends are hiding away from water. Okay. Now, it's also it has lots of proteins. Okay. Proteins are embedded in the cell membrane. What we call this cell membrane is, we often call it a phospholipid bilayer. Phospholipid bilayer. Bi means two, so it's two layers of phospholipids forming one membrane. So that one membrane is made of two layers of phospholipids. So you can write a phospholipid bilayer, right? That's a sort of a key characteristic of cell membrane, a phospholipid bilayer. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Here is the image of a cell membrane from electron micrographs. So here, as you can see, the two lines representing a phospholipid bilayer. Okay. All right. The accepted model for the cell membrane called fluid mosaic model. So as you saw in the video, it was presented by a group of scientists, or what was his name? What was their name? I forget. But they had presented a model that best describes understanding of cell membrane, and it's called fluid mosaic model. So the word fluid means that it's sort of fluid. It's flexible. The membrane is sort of fluid. It's not static. It's not it's not fixed. Okay, it sort of moves and it is flexible. It has ability to sort of like stretch a little. Okay, and mosaic means when you do mosaic art, right? You're putting little pieces to form something big, right? Like you put many little small pieces to make something large and artistic and beautiful. So the mosaic means, there's lots of something, and that something is the protein. There are lots and lots of different proteins embedded in the cell membrane. Okay, so the fluid represents the membrane being flexible and it has sort of motion to it, and mosaic means it's got lots of little things such as proteins. Okay, so alright, the cell membrane regulates what enters or what leaves the cell, but how does it do that? How does it regulate or control what comes in and out? Well, selectively permeable. So we say that cell membrane is selectively permeable, which means selectively means like it's selecting, right? It's sort of choosy. It selects certain things. Permeable means letting it through. Okay? It passes through. So cell membrane allows certain things to pass through. That's what selectively permeable means. Membrane allows certain things to pass through, but not all. So here's a diagram that shows, okay, these dots in the middle, that's a cell membrane, and there are spaces or holes in the membrane. So based on the size of the molecules, these things may or may not be able to pass through the membrane. Okay? Over here, here's another picture. These spaces or the holes on the membrane are quite small. So these red things, red dots, could pass through in both directions. But these big green molecules and the yellow molecules won't be able to pass through. Okay, so we get this analogy, but what is creating this hole? What do we mean by having like these little pores or holes? Before we talk about that, let's look at what the cell membrane is made of. The cell membrane is made of largely lipids. It's got lots of proteins, and it also has carbohydrates. Now in the video, it mentioned a glycoprotein, which is a carbohydrate attached to the protein, serving as like an identification marker that identifies what the cell is. So these little branches, these are carbohydrates that are attached to a protein. So these help identify what this cell is. Okay? So it's a specific marker or ID tag of the cell. These carbohydrates may be attached to protein. So notice that these blue things are proteins. This is attached to the protein. But notice that over here, this carbohydrate is attached to phospholipid. Okay, so there are two kinds. There is carbohydrate attached to protein, and there are carbohydrates attached to phospholipid. Okay, so but it's got lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, all in the cell membrane. All right, we talked about phospholipids, so let's move on. Besides these phospholipids, notice that there are also some cholesterol embedded in the membrane, and cholesterol look like this. They have 4 rings of hydrocarbon chain fused together, and they may be embedded in the membrane as well. So lipids include phospholipids and cholesterol. Cholesterol is fat. Okay? So having these cholesterol in the membrane add the fluidity and flexibility to the cell membrane. Right? The more lipids it has, more flexible it is, more fluid it can be. Okay. All right, proteins are embedded all throughout the membrane. This divides the proteins in terms of the position, okay? How they're positioned in the membrane. Look at, for example, these large ones. They are embedded in the membrane. It's like embedded in the layer, in the bilayer. But these small ones, like this one over here, this one here, or this small one here, how is it different from these large ones? Where are they positioned? They're not embedded in the membrane, but they're hanging on the side, right? On this side, so these ones that are attached on the side are called peripheral proteins. They're because they sit on one side, or the other side sit on one side, peripheral. And integral proteins are proteins that are embedded through the membrane, or they extend across the membrane. So this is just categorizing the proteins in terms of their positions. Okay, but categorize it in another way, right? So integral proteins are embedded, peripheral proteins are on the side. Carbohydrates two kinds of carbohydrates are called glycolipid and glycoprotein. So the glyco, what do you think glyco means? Or it comes from, yeah, sugar, like it means sugar. So glycolipid is the sugar attached to the lipid. Glycoprotein is a sugar attached to a protein. So again, this is categorizing what type of carbohydrates are found in the membrane. Their roles slightly vary, so you can take a look at the functions of glycoprotein and glycolipid. Okay, I do have a worksheet that goes with this. That's actually notes I want to give you. So, I can take it. This is for taking notes. On the back side, here are some questions I want you to answer. So why don't you look at the back side and label the cell parts and work on the questions now. Okay?
Do this.
Let's do the back side.